2.4 million in US dollar deposits, 80 million in peso deposits, that they cannot be brushed aside as innocent exclusions. The very same Constitution that he had sworn to obey and uphold makes it mandatory for a public officer like him to submit a true declaration under oath of his assets, liabilities, and net worth. Mr. Corona knows this because in cases brought to the Supreme Court, he had punished his fellow government workers for failing to disclose far lesser amounts. He should have declared the above. Thus, I vote guilty on Article 2. Mr. President, in a few hours, we will be pulling the plug on this afternoon's political telenovela. With a sigh of relief, let's go back to our regular programming where hard, unheralded work is done away from the camera lights. The end of the trial doesn't call for celebration. It calls for getting our bearings back and setting our priorities right again. 1 in 5 people who watch this trial on TV occasionally go hungry. 1 in 3 in the labor force had all the time to watch because they had no work. 5 in 10 people who followed this trial rated themselves poor. 80% do not even have a bank account or savings. So if we think what we have done here is Herculean, then we stand indicted for being clueless of what our people want and ignorant of our true potential. It is easy to impeach one man. What is hard is to impeach hunger, to impeach joblessness, and to impeach poverty. Thank you, Mr. President.
The Honorable Senator Judge Revilla.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mga kababayan, I stand here today in a historic moment when we render judgment not to an ordinary citizen, but to the highest official of our co-equal branch in government, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the Philippines. As the late President Theodore Roosevelt said, a nation must be judged in part by the character of its public men, not merely by their abilities, but their ideals and the measure in which they realize these ideals, by their attitude in real life, and much more by their attitude in public life, both as regards their conception of their duties toward their country and their conception of their duty embodied in its government towards its own people. I have heard all the arguments, considered all pieces of evidence of the prosecution and the defense, and heard directly from the Honorable Chief Justice himself. As much as the Chief Justice of the Republic of the Philippines expects and demands and is worthy of all the respect and considerations due to his office and to his person, he, in return, has the responsibility to be the epitome of a public servant with the highest ethical standards. Bilang pinakamataas na mahistrado ng bansang ito, ang kanyang panunungkulan ay dapat walang bahid kahit katiting dahil sa mandato ng kanyang katungkulan at kahalagahan ng kanyang posisyon. In the end, I arrive with the conclusion that through his own direct admission, the Chief Justice failed to properly disclose all of his assets in his SAL-N. This, therefore, has necessary consequences that attach to the position he hold in trust. I prayed hard for divine providence and guidance in this one great decision of my life, Mr. President. Napakahirap man, alang-alang sa pagkakaisa at paghilom ng ating bayan, alang-alang sa pagpapatibay ng mga institusyon ng ating pamahalaan, alang-alang sa mga darating pang henerasyon at ang ating kinabukasan, I find Chief Justice Renato C. Corona guilty.
The Honorable Senator Judge Soto.
Mr. President, Article 2 of the Articles of Impeachment states that the respondent committed culpable violation of the Constitution and or betrayed the public trust when he failed to disclose to the public his statements of assets and liabilities and net worth. I have come across Supreme Court decisions whereby lower court judges had been dismissed and deprived of all their benefits for simple infractions of law or missteps in judicial conduct. Question: should the same strict measures ought to be applied to the members of the Supreme Court? The answer depends on who you ask. So I put that aside. Let's put that aside. After 43 days, this trial has been heard by the people. The Constitution mandates that the Senate try impeachment cases. Ang taong bayan ay naghahalal ng mga senador mula sa iba't ibang propesyon at estado ng lipunan upang sila'y katawanin at bumigkas ng kanilang saloobin. Ang tunay na hukom sa paglilitis na ito ay ang taong bayan. Nadinig nila ang dalawang panig. Tulad namin, hindi lahat sila abogado. Ngunit ang kapangyarihan ng demokrasya ay nasa kanilang mga kamay. In my conscience, Mr. President, I have heard their decision. And for them, I vote guilty.
The Honorable Senator Judge Trillanes.
Thank you, Mr. President. My verdict is guilty, and this is my explanation. Based on the evidence and admissions, Chief Justice Renato Corona had at least 80 million pesos and $2.4 million, which he did not disclose in his SALN. As an explanation, he said that he was bound by the absolute confidentiality clause of the Foreign Currency Deposit Law. As to the peso deposits, the Chief Justice claimed that they were commingled with other funds that were not his, and therefore, he could not disclose them. However, Article 11, Section 17 of the Constitution is very clear in its language. A public officer or employee shall, upon assumption of office and as often thereafter as may be required by law, submit a declaration under oath of his assets, liabilities, and net worth. To interpret the confidentiality clause of RA 6426 as a prescription to the disclosure of dollar deposits is erroneous, self-serving, and an afterthought. As to the claim that the peso deposits were commingled, the AMLAC documents, which showed a steady stream of deposits worth millions of pesos to the accounts of the Chief Justice, were given more weight and credence. Now, as to the matter of public policy, it is in the interest of the country to convict Chief Justice Renato Corona. A conviction signifies that transparency and accountability as principles in governance take precedence over legal technicalities. This effectively takes away any refuge for the corrupt public official. Moreover, the claim of commingled funds and the confidentiality of dollar deposits will never be accepted as alibis. A conviction also signifies that our system of checks and balances is working well, and that impeachment can now be effectively used as a tool of the state to make high government officials accountable for their actions. From now on, no one is untouchable. Lastly, a conviction signifies that we have considerably raised the standards for a Chief Justice of our Supreme Court. He must not only possess vast legal knowledge and wisdom necessary to interpret the law according to its spirit and intent, but more importantly, he must have unquestionable moral integrity and strength of character to render him impervious to corruption and political pressure as he administers justice for our country and people. Thank you.
Honorable Senator Judge Villar.
Mr. President, my esteemed colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, my vote is for the conviction of the Chief Justice. Let me explain. Nahirapan po ako dito sa aking desisyon na ito. Pinapanood ko po mabuti ang mga hearings natin. Nalulungkot po ako sa maraming mga bagay na nangyayari noon. Dito sa properties po, nababasa natin 45. Hindi ko po binilang yan. 5 lamang ang aking binilang. Doon sa 82 accounts, hindi ko rin po binilang yon, 4 lamang po ang aking binilang. Doon sa $12 million, hindi ko rin po matanggap yon. Binilang ko lamang ay 2.4. Ang desisyon ko po ay base sa kanyang inamin po na kanyang pag-aari. Ito po ay yung $2.4 million at yung 80 million pesos. Dito po, medyo ako nahirapan. Dahil, alam po naman natin na ang posisyon po ng pangunahing maestrado ng ating Korte Suprema ay siyang pinakamataas. Ay siyang merong pinakamataas na batayan ng integridad. Nabalitaan ko po yung isang empleyado na nahatulan dahil hindi nagdeklara ng kanyang tindahan. Nahirapan po ako dyan. Bagamat mabigat po sa aking kalooban, talagang naniniwala kasi ako na dapat ideklara ang FCDO account. Sapagkat yun ay pag-aari pa rin. Nung dumating po si Chief Justice Corona, ako po ay naawa sa kanya. Dahilan sa noong pa lamang sa mga hearings, talagang naawa na po ako kay CJ Corona. Dahilan siya talagang pagbukas ko ng dyaryo, headline na siya. Hindi pa man po siya guilty, ay parang meron ng conclusion ang ating pong mga media at ang mga tao. Kaya naglabasan na po yung kanyang mga properties, 82 accounts, $12 million. Subalit nung mapatunayan naman po na hindi ganun kadami ay mga nasa page 14 na lamang. Naalala ko rin po kasi na nangyari din sa akin po yan. Nung ako po tumakbong pagkapangulo, ay katakot-takot na kasinungalingan din na aking inabot. Katakot-takot na bintang. Nariyang meron daw akong bahay sa Utah na pagkalaki-laki mansyon, hindi pa ako nakakarating sa Utah. Tanggi ako ng tanggi, subalit wala naman nakikinig. Nandong hindi daw ako mahirap. Ako ba'y magtitinda ng hipon kung hindi ako mahirap? Kung ako mayaman? Nililiwanag ko po na ako'y mahirap at tingnan po ninyo buhay namin sa tundo. Subalit, napaniwala po marami sa ating mga mamamayan. Ito po naman yung sinasabi ko dahil hindi wala po ako sama ng loob kanino man. Na aalala ko lamang po tuwing tititigan ko si CJ Corona. Nandiyan na rin po yung C5, Andang Hari Road, na ngayon po ginagamit ng milyon-milyong mga Pilipino na nakikinabang po sila. Hindi po ako nakinabang dyan. Isinama ko pa lahat ng membro ng media dyan sa kali na yan. Itinuro ko po lahat yan. Hindi po ako nakinabang dyan. Subalit, ito po yung nagamit na issue. Villaroyo, daw ako. Pinakamalaking kasinungalingan yan. Alam po ng makasama natin sa House na bumoto ang aking asawa laban kay GMA sa impeachment. Nagkampanya ang Nationalista Party para ma-impeach si GMA, Pangulong Arroyo. Alam po naman natin na ako ang namuno ng investigasyon ng Weteng laban sa Pangulong Arroyo. Alam natin na Nationalista Party member ang namuno ng investigasyon ng ZTE, si Alan Cayetano. Alam natin na Nationalista Party member ang namuno ng pag-imbestiga sa Hello Garci. Yan pong mga miyembro na yan, kinusulta ko, sabi ko, go ahead. Napakaraming beses ko pong kinwestiyon ang Pangulong Arroyo sa Supreme Court. Subalit, sa kabila niyan, sinabing ako'y Villaroyo at anuman tanggi ang gawin ko. Alam naman na may kandidato po noon si Pangulong Arroyo na iba. Wala pong mangyari. Dahilan po, may konklusyon na ang media. Inuulit ko po na wala na ako sama ng loob, nakalimutan ko na po yan. Tangat nga lamang at naalala ko, tuwing maalala ko rin si CJ Corona ng huling araw. Marami pa ho yan at ayoko na lamang banggitin ngayon. Hindi siguro po ito ang tamang panahon. Dahil unang-una nakalimutan ko na nga po yung mga bagay na yan. Kaya lamang dapat din po tayo mag-ingat. Yung pagwasak po ng pangalan ng isang tao, isang bagay na dahan-dahan po tayo. Hindi naman po kailangan yan. Dito naman, ang issue ay simple lamang. Ang issue po dito ay kung dapat idineklara ang yung sa SALN ang dollar deposits. Sa dami-dami po na sinabi, doon lamang nalimita ang issue. At dito po kami halos lahat gumawa ng desisyon sapagkat hindi naman po namin matanggap na hindi kailangang ideklara ang FCDU account. Bagamat ako po bumoto ng guilty, naniniwala po ako mabuting tao si CJ Corona. Ito ay isang error in judgment. At inuulit ko po na napakataas po ng antas ng integridad na kailangan sa posisyon ng pangunahing maestrado ng ating pong Korte Suprema. Pabayaan niyo pong bigay ko rin ang obserbasyon ko sa mga nangyari noon. Ako'y nalulungkot din na meron tayo, at sana wag na po mangyari sa mga darating na panahon ng illegal na pagkuha ng mga ebidensya ay parang normal o binabaliwala natin. Napakahalaga po niyan sa ating sistema ng hustisya. Napakahalaga ng isang ebidensya na hindi legal ang pagkuha ay hindi pwedeng tanggapin. Sana po, yung mga, hindi na maulit, yung mga little lady, yung mga mailbox, mga Mr. Anonymous, yan po, sabi nga ni Congressman Pariñas, mga palusot. Huwag na po sana maulit yan sa mga darating na panahon. At huwag na rin po sana maulit yung walang